Welcome to Strange and Scary Story Talk. I'm your host, Heather Nani, and tonight we're talking about The Possibility of Evil by Shirley Jackson. Now, if you haven't yet read the story, turn this off and go and read it. You can get it online because this is full of spoilers, and we don't want to spoil this story for you because it's too excellent. Anyway, The Possibility of Evil was published in the Saturday Evening Post on December 18th, 1965. Sadly, Shirley Jackson had passed away a few months earlier in August of that year. In 1966, she won the Edgar Allan Poe Award for the story. And scholars and academics, many say that this story, The Possibility of Evil, is her best and most mature work. Joyce Carol Oates herself says that the story is terrifying. But it's not terrifying the way we think of terrifying, right? There's no demons or ghosts and anyone crawling backwards on the ceiling. You can go to bed and turn your lights off and go in your basement and change your laundry, and you're not going to be looking around your shoulder. However, it sits with you. And if you think about it a lot, it's deeply disturbing in its own way. And yet, when you read the story, it has a rather jaunty, happy tone to it. It is about the spinster, 71-year-old Miss Adela Strangeworth. Her family has pretty much founded this town where the story takes place. For the setting, right, it's kind of like a Hallmark movie. Just take it back a few decades and you can picture where the story is set. Miss Strangeworth lives on Pleasant Street. And the beginning of the story finds her stepping on a beautiful July day, and she's admiring her roses, her red and pink and white roses that her grandmother planted and her mom tended and now she tends. You find out that people want her roses and she won't share them because those roses belong on Pleasant Street. The only place those roses go are in front of her house or in her house when she cuts a few. We discover that her grandmother, Miss Strangeworth's grandfather, founded the town. He built the first house on Pleasant Street. He built the mill. And when the townspeople in recent history wanted to erect a statue, a monument to Ethan Frome, I believe, Miss Strangeworth argued that it should be a statue of her grandfather because without him, the town wouldn't exist. She herself has never left the town, and she brags about it for more than a day, which is strange to most of us, but it's something that she's like really proud of. Anyway, story goes on. You guys read it. She goes to the grocer's, and she's encountering all the townspeople, and everyone says, "Hello, Miss Strangeworth," and she makes small, chit-chat, exchange pleasantries. She is noticing, though, something off with each of the people in the town. Mr. Lewis is a little forgetful. Mrs. Harper is shaking a little bit. The librarian's hair is tousled, and that bothers her. She runs into Don and Helen Crane and their baby. And Don leaves to go into the grocery store, and Helen Crane, the mother, confides in Miss Strangeworth that she's concerned about the baby, that the baby isn't meeting developmental milestones, and Miss Strangeworth assures her, no, it's normal, relax. Anyway, Miss Strangeworth seems kind of delightful. A little annoying, but kind of delightful. Maybe like she's in everyone's business, but it's okay. So she goes back home, and she admires her roses again. She goes inside, contemplates having a cup of tea, decides that'll ruin her dinner, and now it's time for Miss Strangeworth to sit in her parlor, decorated with the furnishings of her grandmother and her mother, and write her letters. So she sits down. She unlocks the drawer where the stationery is kept, which right there we might think is a little strange, but no matter. She takes out her formal stationery with her letterhead and pulls out the colored paper underneath, paper that's green and pink and blue, and the narrator tells us that that's paper that everybody uses, you know, the kind of stuff that you scribble your grocery list on and you send the letters to school. And Miss Strangeworth begins to compose her letters, and the first one is, to quote, haven't you ever seen an idiot child before? Some people shouldn't have children. And then she writes another one. I believe the other one is to Miss Harper or Mrs. Harper, saying that, don't you know why everyone's making fun of laughing at you at bridge? Sometimes the wife is always the last to know. And then she writes another letter. And the narrator explains that, you know, she's the only Strangeworth left in town. And as long as evil is lurking around, it is her job, she sees it, to make people aware. Now, the narrator also says that Miss Strangeworth does not deal in facts, but in possibility. And the narrator also says that Miss Strangeworth enjoys writing these stories. She seems very pleased with herself, in fact. She's been doing it for a year or so. So anyway, she then finishes her letter writing, goes upstairs, takes a nap, has her dinner, goes upstairs, takes a nap, gets up very happy, gets the letters, and off she goes to the post office where she mails her letters, and one of the letters falls out of the box. And she doesn't realize. And there's a teenage boy, the Harris boy, who notices this is somebody else that Miss Strangeworth has disrupted his life and his girlfriend's life as well. And he calls to Mrs. Strangeworth, Miss Strangeworth, you dropped your letter, but she doesn't hear. So he, being an actually, we're assuming, kind person, decides to take the letter and hand deliver it himself. You know who the letter's going to? Don Crane. The father, Don and Helen Crane, the parents of the baby that the lovely, elderly Miss Strangeworth is suggesting is an idiot child and that the parents shouldn't have children. Anyway, Miss Strangeworth is unaware. She goes home, she goes to bed. She wakes up happy. Happy because the neighbors will be receiving their letters. She goes downstairs and thinks about what she's having for breakfast and whether she should have waffles. And she goes to her front door where the mail slot is, and she discovers that a letter has been returned to her. And it is the letter she wrote to Don Crane, and it's returned with another note that says something to the effect of, how do you like your roses now? And she starts to cry. And we all know what happened to her roses. He destroyed her roses. And here's the weird thing about this story, and this is where I'm curious what you think. I feel sorry for Miss Strangeworth, and she's horrible. And you think about this woman, so concerned about the possibility of evil and overlooking the certainty of evil within her, or worse yet, not overlooking it, embracing it. And we think about how someone like this, how people like this exist in the world. People that put ideas in other people's heads, ideas that disturb and disrupt them, suggestions that maybe someone's doing this or maybe someone's doing this bad to you. And how damaging a person like Miss Strangeworth is. And yet, there's something about this elderly lady at the end of the story that you just feel sad for her. And you wonder if Shirley Jackson wanted you to feel this way or not, because clearly she's a villain, is she not? But then I think about Shirley Jackson herself and the similarities with Miss Strangeworth in the fact that Shirley Jackson was a writer, but she was also a housewife, married to Stanley Hyman, a literary critic and a professor at Bennington College. She had 4 children. She was expected to stay home and raise those children. And it was said that she felt a little bit as a prisoner in her own home. She, later in life, there were periods where she wouldn't leave the house, where she was afraid to go out. And you think about that fear of entering the world, and you think about Miss Strangeworth as a more demented, twisted, evil version. She too won't leave her home because she considered this town her home, right? She's barricaded in this house with her roses and her tradition and her sense of righteousness and knowing it all. And she too isn't leaving or isn't moving. And as Miss Strangeworth writes her letters that suggest the possibility of evil to people, doesn't Shirley Jackson with her stories suggest to us the possibility of evil within ourselves and those around us? So anyway, that's a question I want you to take with you. Did Shirley Jackson want us to feel sympathy for Miss Strangeworth? And also the final question about the roses. What do you think those represent? Because I tend to think they represent the being imprisoned by tradition and your history and things that are shrouded in beauty but really underneath are pretty ugly. Anyway, meet me on social media. My handles are down below. Tell me what you think. Give me your answers to these questions. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. And then next on Friday, we're going to be talking about Joyce Carol Oates, again, who said that the possibility of evil was terrifying and was an editor of one of Jackson's books. We're going to read Where Are You Going? Or talk about Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? You read that before you come back here. And now that's a story that's terrorizing. So get reading and get in touch with me, and I'll see you in a few days. Thanks.